All right, good morning, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started this morning with our coffee chat. My name is Mary Matthews. I'm one of the team members at the Diverse Learners Cooperative. And this morning, our topic is going to be talking about remote behavior support. So we're really excited. We have a guest speaker, Justine Katzenbach, and so she will be sharing with us her experiences in providing remote behavior support during these school closures. So again, I just wanted to let everybody know we're going to post these slides and a recording of these slides at the end. So anything that you see in here in terms of a resource or a link is all going to be linked in the slides that will be available on our website, which I'll share with you also during the presentation. If you have any questions, Brooke, our fearless leader, is going to be managing the chat box, so you can shoot them in there, or we'll have time at the end where we can all unmute ourselves and ask questions to anybody on our team, Justine, or each other. So we are going to get started. All right, so like I said this morning, we are the Diverse Learners Cooperative, and so our goal right now is to provide teachers and leaders with professional development support around supporting diverse learners, especially during school closure, figuring out what that looks like, providing opportunities to collaborate with one another through different platforms, and making sure that we are setting up our diverse learners for success both in and out of the traditional school model, what that looks like. So one of the ways in which we're doing this is hosting coffee chats, we're hosting online collaborative communities, and we're hosting some PD sessions as well. So as we go through today, it's going to be a quick, short 15-minute little chat, but we want to make sure that you just are thinking about one thing that you can take away from this conversation that will improve your practice today, tomorrow, for the rest of the week. We're going to throw a lot of information at you all at once just to fit everything in these 15 minutes. But again, we want you to pick one thing that you can take away with you and share with a colleague. The three areas that we're going to really focus on today are figuring out how to work with families to ask the right questions to make sure that we can provide the right behavior support for students. We're also going to be showing you some tools that we've used ourselves in our classrooms or at home with our own families, or that we've shared with parents to use with their families that could be helpful for your students as well during this time. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss what different school districts are doing all across the country in the hopes that that can spur some ideas that you might be able to replicate within your own school community. So we've heard a lot of different people talking about all their students and the unexpected shifts they've seen in behavior. And so one of the things that we want to consider is that what students may have exhibited in school is not going to be the same that they're exhibiting at home. Some teachers have said that they had students with challenging behavior who now are doing fine at home. They've adjusted well to the self-paced learning and the online classrooms. Whereas other students are the complete opposite. They were doing completely fine in school, doing work completion, and out at their home, they're really struggling with a lot of those executive functioning skills and showing a lot of frustration with work or demands or home schedule that they have to do. And then we have our students that were demonstrating challenging behavior in school that are now demonstrating completely different, but also challenging behavior at home. And we have to figure out what are the right supports that we need in order to support these students now with their parents. We want to make sure that we're equipping parents with everything that they need to set up their child for success. So as we think about our students this morning and the families that we're supporting, think about which category your student might fall into of the one I described, or it might be something completely different. But keep that in mind, and we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions to figure out how to support families best. When we think about asking the right questions, we want to make sure that we truly understand what's happening. A lot of times, and a lot of us right now, have a lot of calls to be making. We have a lot of families to check in with, and it can feel like these calls become either robotic or like a checklist of things that I just have to get done and make sure that I've contacted every family. The downside to that is that we might be asking questions that feel like they're saying the right things or that we feel like are digging deeper, but in reality, we're not really providing a space for parents to share what's truly happening at home. The most common one is, how are things going? How are you doing? And I know just personally and from other families I've talked to, the automatic responses say, oh, things are fine, things are good. But that doesn't really explain the whole story. So if we can consider asking more specific questions, that might help us dig deeper. So for example, we might say something like, how is your child responding to the shift to a home schedule? That might give space for the parent to say, well, you know, they're not sleeping very well, or they're crying really easily, they're getting really frustrated, or if the student was verbal before, now they're not using their words as much to ask for help. It just opens up a much wider space for parents to be able to share with us what behavior is truly looking like at home. Same thing for what do you need? A lot of the times we ask that question with the best intentions, but parents might not know what they need. They might not know what supports are available that would be helpful for that situation. So we can really try to hone in on what supports might be appropriate by asking parents what specific behaviors they see that are new. What's something that your child didn't used to do when they were going to school traditionally every day of the work week? And so by honing in on those behaviors, we can then provide and say, hey, I have this specific tool that could be helpful for you. Can I explain it to you to see if that might work? And that creates buy-in and investment with the parents, because you really are truly listening to what they're saying about their child. And then you're providing a very specific resource targeted exactly for their need. So just keep in mind as you're having these conversations with families that you're asking really specific questions to make sure that you're offering them the opportunity to share. Some of the tools that we can offer are structural environmental changes. It doesn't necessarily have to be a piece of paper or an app on a phone. It can just be some environmental supports. One of the ways we can do this is just to encourage parents to come up with a schedule or a routine. Even if it's not followed exactly day to day, it at least provides some flexibility and predictability for students to be able to work within at home, so that they know the same things to expect pretty much are going to happen every day. We can also work with parents to set really simple and specific behavioral goals. A lot of our students might have behavior goals in their IEP that don't quite translate to home, or they're really social dependent, or they're really based on school tasks like work completion that just might not be appropriate for the home setting. So one of the things we can do is ask the parents, what's one behavior you would like to see your child start doing at home? And then we can create a goal around that, as well as incentives or strategies to help that goal or to help that behavior start to occur. So when we think about those things, we want to make sure that we're providing strategies and tools that support the behavior at home. And for example, it might be that a student wants to, their parent wants them to ask for help. And so we can either provide a small little card that the student can use before using the words instead to help increase or shape that behavior. We can also provide suggestions for visuals or different timers or that sort of thing that could help with a number of behaviors. And the goals, again, might not look like IEP goals. It might look like is able to transition off of technology devices, or is able to share tech devices with siblings. And we can create a really simple plan around that. And then we want to make sure that we're just tracking progress. And again, asking those specific questions with parents when we check in. How is so-and-so doing with the goal of sharing tech devices with their siblings, so that you can get a clear read on what further supports you might need to provide. So some of the tools that we're showing here are ones available on our website. So if you click on either of these images, it'll take you to links to download the tools for free from there. A couple of other tools that we've gathered from additional websites are ones that you also might find helpful. So this one is a parent-student behavior contract. And so this is where you could outline those goals that you want to see done, as well as the steps that you need to take to get there. This is also a great online incentive program. So as teachers, this is something we can use during check-ins with students. It has 75 ideas for online incentives, everything that can be done over the computer. So it's a great way to still provide that structure and that reinforcement for students even outside of the school building. And then these are just two different types of trackers that you might be able to use. Google Forms is a great one to be able to use with parents, and it's something that you could even send parents every day to have them rate behavior or to make notes and email it back to you. So it's a great way to keep everything in one place. So now what we're going to do is we are going to hear from two board certified behavior analysts who are working in two different states away from Nashville, and they're going to describe to us what they have been doing in their school districts. Naomi was unable to be with us in person live this morning because she's currently running some Zoom sessions with her students. So I'm going to go over her information, and then Justine is going to share with us what she's been doing in her school district. So Naomi currently works for the Titus School in New York City. It's a recently opened school, and it serves specifically students with challenging behavior who also have diagnoses of autism, mental health needs, specific learning disabilities. So it's a smaller school. It's only about 50 students, but they are working really hard right now to still provide all supports online, even when school is closed. What this looks like is they're using Zoom as their main platform to provide one-to-one sessions for academics, for counseling, for occupational therapy, speech and language, physical therapy, all ABA type services as well. They're also using a platform called Edmodo to be able to send worksheets and at-home activities for students to complete during this time. She recognizes that because their population is so small, this is a really unique opportunity for them to have really close one-to-one contact with students by sharing it with all staff members. One of the really cool things that they're doing that I wanted to share with you all was that they have a crisis support hotline support families with behavior escalations. This kind of goes back to what we were sharing earlier about asking the right questions. I love this hotline idea because it's a dedicated way and a place for parents to go to say, I need help with behavior. It's not judgmental. That's what it's there for. And they're able to call it either during or after behavior escalations to know how to best support their child at home. So not only are they supporting the child, but they're equipping the parents and the families with the right wording, with the right tools, with the right steps to take to make sure that everybody is safe and calm and de-escalated after behavior incidents occur at home. So that was just something that was really unique, that if you're able to coordinate that with your school team or with your district, that could be something that's really helpful for families and remotely supporting behavior at this time. Justine, would you like to share what your district is doing?
Sure. So I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I work for Buncombe County Schools. So Buncombe County Schools serves the Asheville city, but there's actually within the city limits, or there's this concentrated area that serves Asheville City Schools. So we service like a pretty wide range of schools. We have 26,000 students. It's K through 12 public school district. But I serve as a behavior analyst for one cluster district of 6 schools. So very similar if you work for Metro Nashville Public Schools as like the behavior support team, it's sort of the same idea. And so I work with students with and without IEPs. So that kind of creates somewhat of a different approach right now based on the specific student I'm working with. But what we've been doing is we've currently been using Zoom to provide some live student and family support. I'm going to be honest, it looks very different from what Naomi's describing. I think a lot of what we're doing is more sort of like crisis response triage kind of work. So just as an example, right now I sort of see myself as like a liaison between some of the families I have connections with and other resources. So for example, our district is doing like a huge food resource right now. So I'm getting lunches to families. And today I have a call with one of my students who sees a therapist, and through that therapist also sees a nurse practitioner, who is facilitating his medication. And that family was having a really hard time accessing how to work Zoom and just having internet. And so a lot of what I've been doing is just trying to support getting that child connected with the therapist and getting connected with Zoom. So we did like a live FaceTime of trying to show how Zoom works. So it just looks very different. I think it's a lot of that kind of, let's just try to keep the children as safe and as and families as supported as possible. We've also been sending home packages. So we have different schools that are open for parents to do sort of drive-by pickups things, which I know is also happening in Nashville right now. And we're sending things like work, but also token boards, visual schedules, those types of things home. So kind of accommodating to specific individual student needs. And then we've also been doing, our district does monthly child and family team meetings. And we've been hosting those still on Zoom just to make sure that we're getting some information on what the families need. In terms of unique opportunity, right now, we've been doing a lot of, and I'm sure this is something that you all have been doing as well, but just a lot of continuing education units for our own practice. So learning a lot. I did a unit yesterday on just how to do using basically robots to do ABA services, which is pretty interesting. So just learning some really different outside the box things and trying to see how we might be able to use that. We're also just doing a lot of revisions to our district PD. And as I said, a lot of what we're doing is also just supporting, making sure that families have, behavior support that they need, but also just one of my colleagues is working with a family who it was identified that the family, didn't have access to running water right now. And they were all sick with COVID. So it was a pretty bad situation. So just figuring out drop off of water, stuff like that. So it's been a bit more of a link between sort of the social work counseling world and social emotional world and that behavioral world is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful to bring up too, is that oftentimes behavior doesn't occur in isolation, right? There's all of these other needs at play that we really need to support families with. And so even if we have the goal of providing behavior support, what else can we be listening for that the family also needs in order to truly support the well-being and needs of the entire family unit? That's great. Thanks, Justine. So it is about 8:45, so we're going to wrap up soon. We have this resource. It's a one-page resource on our website that could be really helpful for your school teams about how to ensure the well-being of the whole child, right? We talked about behavior today, but there's so many other areas beyond behavior and beyond academics that we can support students with at this time. So that resource is on our website. All of our COVID-related resources can be found on our resource hub, which is listed right here on the website. So feel free to check that out for any of the resources that we talked about today. As we move on with our busy days ahead, we want to make sure that we're just keeping in mind some questions about how we can improve our practices with remote behavior support. So are we asking the right questions to families to truly understand what's going on? Are we providing tools that are targeted to the answers that we're hearing? And how can we provide supports as a whole team beyond just ourselves as the special ed teacher or case manager or the behavior specialist to make sure that everybody's involved in providing support for the families at this time? So if you're able to stay on, we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions for me, for Brooke, Justine, we're all here to be able to support you right now. And so feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions. I know Brooke's also been managing the chat box, so if there's any questions that have come up, we can share those as well.
I saw the group in the group chat. It looks like there was a question on how schools provide behavioral support remotely during a live class, which is a really good question. I will say our PBIS meetings at our schools, our PBIS teams are still meeting right now, doing our monthly meeting. So we're doing a lot of things like still doing, school-wide kind of like dress up days and things like that to try to build some culture. I do know that some teachers that I've worked with, since I push in with some teachers on live Zooms, have done things where they, and this is usually for more elementary, but they have done sort of incentives of like, they've kind of thought of some fun games to play, or the last, chunk of time of their class, they've let kids sort of share things that they're excited about, things like that. And that sort of helped some with, creating and doing some fun, like, Star Student Awards, things like that, even through the live Zoom sessions.
That's a great idea. Another thing that I've heard of too is that at least on the platform using Zoom, I'm sure this can happen on other platforms too, but is that teachers have been really intentional about student grouping. So while they might have a live class of 20 middle schoolers or high schoolers, they then start breakout rooms. And so they assign students to specific breakout rooms with very intentional pairings based on behavior in order to try to reduce the attention that students might be seeking from the whole class over a Zoom live session or that sort of thing. So they can get creative with how they structure the online live classes as well in order to proactively set up students for success.
I think also equipping families with what's expected over Zoom. I know that that's happening here at my house when my preschooler is on Zoom meetings, as I'm prepping him with like, these are the expectations and that we don't touch the iPad during this time and whatnot. And so I would think that translates to any age of making sure everybody understands the expectations of how do we use this platform and what are our goals. I also think keeping Zoom sessions short to an extent, if we can chunk the amount of time that students have to engage, is not the easiest way to engage in the same, like to translate classroom instruction to Zoom minute for minute is not, I don't think, the goal. And so how do we reduce the amount of time and increase the expectations of learning this new platform, and what does it mean to be a student in this online classroom would be helpful. And then I also thought about pre-conferencing, like setting up the student with a goal or their own token board or whatnot, that you can kind of give them a signal like, yep, that you've exhibited what I've asked you to do, and they can reward themselves or have like a tally of, you know, ways that they have achieved the goal throughout the lesson, and you could do a post-conference with them, and those would be one-on-one.
And I know that some teachers I work with who use things like Class Dojo are still using those types of resources. And again, just like simple things like posting their expectations with them and, you know, reviewing them every day with their students, like you mentioned, Brooke.
And realizing that like anxiety and frustration and worry are coming out in all different ways now. So students who might not have struggled in a classroom could be struggling now. And so that those expectations are really important during this time. So.
Great. Well, thanks for those great questions and that discussion. We were really excited to have you this morning, and we're going to continue this format over the next couple of weeks. So our next session coming up is on Monday about providing remote speech support. So we'll also have a guest speaker there talking about how you can support your students' speech and language needs while they're at home during this time to make sure that they're not regressing in any of their skills. If you ever have any questions, you can contact us at Diverse Learners. You can go on our website. We have a lot of resources there. We also have a calendar of events of all the different types of offerings that we're doing between different collaboratives, different coffee sessions, and that sort of thing. So thank you. Have a great Wednesday, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.